How's it going, guys? It's John here from Hot Take Hockey to talk about the Matthews contract that inevitably will be coming. And Bob McKenzie just reports tonight that it's within days now. We're talking about possibly tomorrow, the next day after that, possibly sometime this coming week. So let's break it down, how this will fit, and just the significance of signing Matthews now and looking ahead to locking up Mitch Marner as well, and then looking at Kapanen, Johnsson, and then move forward. So Auston Matthews, Bob McKenzie reports TSN that the Leafs are very close to signing Matthews to a 5 or 6 year deal at a cap hit in between 11 and 12. So if he's at an 11.5 AAV, TSN kind of talked about it. Bob McKenzie broke it down, talking about how everything will fit in projection in terms of other players kind of falling behind Matthews re-signing. So for me, I would really like to see, I mean, 11 and 12, I think for a lot of fans, we're seeing or we're wanting that 8-year deal, because after that, if cap keeps going up, then Matthews is going to want even more. But for a 6-year deal, I would really like the same amount of as Tavares, or very close to it. That would allow the Leafs to have the same timeline for both Matthews and Tavares, and it obviously would be a debacle in 6 years, seeing that Tavares and Matthews, your two top centers, would be pending UFAs at the same time. So that would be kind of scary, but at the same time, 11 million is a lot better than being closer to McDavid at 12.5. So if the Leafs can keep it under 11.5 and for the 6 years, which is not 8, but it's 6, then that could be really good. And how Bob McKenzie breaks it down, which I'm going to pull this up right now, this is his projection for 2019-20 for the payroll for the Leafs. So Anderson obviously at the 5 million, Sparks at the 750K. On the back end, he has obviously Muzzin, Riley, Dermott, Zaitsev, Rosen, and Hainsey. So Callie Rosen, who's in the Marlies right now, 750K. He signed that 2-year deal. And then Ron Hainsey, who he has as projected, coming down from the 3 million AAV to a 2 million AAV. I mean, the Leafs have to fit that defensive side somehow. And we don't know if Zaitsev's going to stay. There has been reports that they're trying to trade Zaitsev regardless. But Hainsey at 2 million wouldn't be the worst thing. Then you move down to forward. Marleau, obviously, who would have one more year at 6.25. You got Hyman at 2.25. And then Matthews at the 11.5. So right in half between the 11 and 12. Then Marner at a 10, which I think is worst case scenario in my opinion. I just think the stock value for Marner is probably a little lower. And I mean, a lot of people would obviously debate that. So we really don't know. But I think 10 million is pretty accurate in terms of what Marner would ask for, which is probably closer to 11, honestly, because him and his agent probably think his stock's closer to Tavares and Matthews, and the Leafs that I would think would start around 8 or 9. So then you move down the list. You got Johnsson re-signing at 2.25, which isn't too bad. Kapanen a bit above that at 2.75. I think a lot of people have talked about Kapanen possibly being over 3 million. And then your last line of Gauthier, Trevor Moore, and then that left wing spot could go to many. I mean, I could even see a Jeremy Bracco being ready for next year. Obviously, that's up for debate. I feel like a Carl Grundstrom could have been there, but now he's obviously in LA through the Muzzin trade. So you guys kind of see where Bob McKenzie's going with that. And by the way, his final numbers with that, so the cap's going up to 85 million next year. The Leafs are still retaining that 1.2 million on Kessel, so 83.8 is where the number's at for the Leafs. In this case, with those projections that Bob McKenzie brought up, the Leafs would have 82.6 million. So that, if you can do the math, they would have $1.2 million of cap space. And they would have about roughly, I think, if my math's correct, I think 4 roster spots to sign for 1.2 million. So, yeah, it's not great. But again, that's with Zaitsev. We've already talked about that's with Zaitsev. And looking back, obviously, Connor Brown, I just kind of realized this now. Connor Brown is not there. And Hainsey for 2 million, and that could be a defenseman that's for around the same as Rosen, which is 750K, maybe a Justin Hall, we don't know. But yeah, so that's up for discussion, but 1.2 million for about 4 roster spots. You could lose Zaitsev, lose Hainsey, Obviously, Hainsey's already a pending UFA, but in this projection, he re-signs for McKenzie. But overall, just to go back to the topic of the video, I think if they get into a Matthews contract really soon, it might not be the worst thing. Obviously, people can look back and say it would have been nice to talk about these contracts for Matthews and Marner earlier on, this past off season. So now you just got to get the best deal possible, and 8 years, you're probably going to see closer to 12 versus 11. If you can get 11 at 6 years, I think Leaf fans, I think the organization should be really happy with that. You're taking 2 less years, saving $1 million every year, which could be key, and we've talked about it, and I've talked about it. I'm not happy that 1.2 is still retained on Kessel, so that's definitely still going to be talked about. But thank you guys so much. Hopefully you subscribe to the channel, drop a like. Again, conversation video. Matthews is probably days within signing. Obviously, we'll make another video if he does sign. But this is just speculation at this point. McKenzie's obviously a very trusted insider, so we'll see what happens for the Leafs. Obviously, in a cap crunch, and moving forward in the season and past playoffs, it's going to be a continued conversation of the Leafs RFA and salary cap situation overall. So thank you guys. Hope you have a good one. Peace out.